special healthcare needs. We're really thrilled today to launch our series, the Future Planning Speaker Series, with Alex Nadworny as our first speaker. Alex, I'm going to give a brief intro to this wonderful woman. Alex began her advisory career working with traditional clients on retirement planning and earned her Certified Financial Planner CFP credential. She joined Special Needs Financial Planning, continuing her own general wealth management practice and having a key role on the Special Needs Financial Planning team, working with client families to educate and advise the next generation of family members. She has been featured as a speaker and in the media on this topic. As a sister and future guardian of her brother James, Alex has a deep understanding of all of the roles and responsibilities that may need to be filled one day. Understanding that no one can replace a parent, Alex created a program called A Team to Carry On, a succession plan for parents of adult children with a disability. The plan focuses on the time when parents are no longer able to do all they do for their loved one and provides guidance and encouragement to outline a team of family, friends, community, and professionals to step in. Now, Alex has many wonderful things, but I'm in her bio, but I'm going to stop there because she's going to do a brief introduction herself. I do want to let people know that it's helpful for us if in the chat you can introduce yourself with your name and email address. We will be sending a brief survey at the end of this presentation, and it's very helpful for us to know how this presentation landed with everyone. So if you're able to fill out the survey, we'd appreciate it very much. And Alex has also mentioned that throughout the presentation, if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We will have a formal Q&A at the end of her presentation, but if a question comes up in the meantime, feel free to put it in the chat. And with that, I want to say welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much, Emily. This is such a pleasure. I remember actually one of the first presentations that I went to actually with Cindy when I joined the Special Needs Financial Planning team was MSSN, planning as a family affair. So very, very close to my heart, obviously being a sibling. And thank you all for attending today. I know it's sometimes difficult to take a break in the middle of the day with the new routines that we all are in. So today I'm going to give a very high level overview of what we call planning for two generations, because obviously it is quite different when you are planning for a loved one that has special needs, because that care will continue past your lifetime. So kind of looking to plan for both while you're alive as well as when you may no longer be able to do all that you're able to do today. So like Emily mentioned, I do often present on the topic, creating a team to carry on. Today is going to be a little bit more on the different items to plan for during your lifetime. Just want to make sure that the right page is showing, right? The full slide? Yeah. Okay. So
Alex, we're actually seeing both your slide and your next slide and your notes.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Let me fix that for you guys there. I was worried that was the case. Okay, much better, right?
Yep, much better.
Thank you. So this is a picture of actually our team here. So this is myself, Cindy Haddad, and John. So Cindy has been involved with MSSN for a long time. Previously was involved with MSSN for a long time. Is also a sibling, and obviously my father is the father of a young man with special needs who's actually not that young. He's going to be 30 in 2 weeks, which I just can't believe. And we usually party in style with the party bus. Going to be a little bit different this year. We'll have to postpone it, but really, really excited for him. So as you can see, we are multi-generational, really important. I think when planning is, again, planning for those multiple generations. So today's agenda, I'm going to be speaking for around 45 minutes or so, 50 minutes, and then we'll allow time for questions, but please reach out if you do have any questions. Want to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to start with going over what we call the special needs planning timeline. That kind of gives you an idea of what different pressure points are coming as you get older and as your child gets older. Obviously, it can be a little bit overwhelming, all the different things that you need to consider. This is kind of to help to prioritize the different items and things that are coming up in the near term. And then I'm going to be going over what we call the 5 factors of special needs planning. And you guys will want to pay attention to MSSN's future email, because they are going to be having Fred Missolo and Annette Hines come and speak about alternatives to guardianship, as well as special needs trusts, which are really important, which I will touch briefly on today as well. And then I'm going to be discussing a framework for financial planning. So that really focuses on where you should be spending your time. Again, like I mentioned before, time is pretty limited. So really want to make sure that you spend your time where it is best suited. Then talking about understanding the basics. So that is some of the different government benefits that are out there. What are the criteria for them to follow? I don't think we're going to have time for housing today. And MSSN is also having someone come to present on housing. But should you have any questions after today, please do not hesitate to reach out anytime. Our contact information is on our website, specialneedsplanning.com, along with a lot of different resources that I will be mentioning today as well. And here's a copy of the book, The Special Needs Planning Guide. A lot of what I talk about today is also in this Special Needs Planning Guide, which is also divided and up and organized in the way of the special needs planning timeline. So it's great because you can pick it up and pick up wherever your child, however old they are, and kind of start to plan based on those 5 factors there. And Cindy and John are actually updating the special needs planning guide to also include a little bit on the team to carry on, as well as make some updates for language. And the ABLE account is kind of the biggest thing since 2007, if you can believe it, that has changed when it comes to special needs planning. So when you are thinking about your personal financial planning, whether it be for your son or daughter and you, is really about balancing your goals, balancing your priorities, as well as balancing where the resources will come from. Every single family, just like your goals and objectives, your child's abilities are different. Your balance will be different for your family, where the resources will come from, again, whether it's from government resources or personal resources. It really is figuring out where you fit on this different kind of criteria that we'll share with you that will, again, kind of bring you back to where you should be spending your time. So government resources are really broken out into 2 different categories: state benefits, which you may be familiar with through DDS, MRC, the different agencies, as well as the school system that your child is enrolled in, depending on the age. That's obviously a state or city local benefit. And then your personal resources. So what monies you have in retirement plans, your savings accounts, as well as maybe life insurance policies as well. So a combination of the different resources that can be used for your lifetime, as well as after you pass away for your child. So this is a really helpful timeline here. We often outline where the family's objectives are underneath this general planning timeline. For example, when is the mortgage going to be paid off? When maybe a car loan is going to be paid off, to then figure out when the cash flow is going to change, to then determine where should those monies maybe be better suited, or when will the cash flow change to be able to pay for potential supplemental supports for the adult child. So here, early intervention, that is obviously, birth to age 3. That's the very early years. If you have a diagnosis that early, usually there are wonderful supports that the whole family is able to receive, including siblings. Not sure how many siblings are on the call today. I think there may be a couple, but that's usually when there is a little bit more involvement with the entire family as a whole. Once the child graduates from early intervention, moves into the school system, that's when the focus is really on that child. What supports do they need to be as independent as possible? Obviously learning different academic skills as well as vocational skills as they get older. My mom always joked and kind of said going from early intervention to the school system, which you may have heard me say before, was going from a cruise ship to a buoy, because it is very different, where it really isn't as involved with the entire family. But still, one of the biggest entitlements that your child will ever receive is the entitlement of that education. So really important, if your child is still in school, to maximize those different supports. So at the age of 14 in Massachusetts, that's when the school should begin to talk to you about transition. We are seeing this happen much, much later in many school systems, but during those IEP meetings at the age of 14, I would start to mention, okay, what is the goal for when they turn age 22? What agency may be serving your child, whether it's Department of Developmental Services, Mass Rehab Commission. I'll talk a little bit more about that. DDS is one of the biggest agencies that provide supports, has the biggest budget, and usually provides the most supports for the individual's entire lifetime. And again, age 14 is when you really start to talk about that, but age 18 is when you really, really want to start pressuring the school to make an introduction, maybe 19, 20, so you can really start to get to know who is that case coordinator going to be and how, and to start talking about what the day looks like for your child and how to use some of the supports the school system can provide to make their life past age 22 that much better. So one example, my mom joined the local Rotary in Melrose, met a lot of local business owners, and was able to set up some volunteer opportunities when James was in school, so that once he did graduate from school, the job stuck with him. A lot of schools have relationships with different business owners, but what happens is once that student then graduates, your child graduates, then another student at the school would then start to take over those different responsibilities at the employer versus your child being able to continue. But there may be situations where your child has done such a great job that they'd love to continue, love to hire them, but just something to be mindful of and maybe a question to ask. And so really important, I think, to kind of think about what is your child going to be doing, whether it's volunteer, whether it's working during the day, participating in some type of community-based day programs. It really varies, but really want to have a little bit of time spent with the school to have them learn some different skills, maybe have some different opportunities and volunteering at different places to see what it is that they like and what it is that maybe they would rather not do. Then age 22, going back to age 18, that is when a lot of different government benefits may be available, mostly federal benefits, which we'll talk more about, because at that point, technically, your child is no longer a child from the government's perspective, even though I would say no 18-year-old is really ready to make all their own decisions. But that is when you do need to start thinking about guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, which again, MSSN is having a speaker come to talk about, but I'll mention briefly. And then age 22, that's when your child would graduate from school and move to an adult program, be provided by adult agency, the state of Massachusetts, so they no longer would be entitled to any benefits from the school system. So really important to get what's called a 688 referral from the school to an agency to start nurturing that relationship and figuring out what supports, what kind of monies you would get potentially from the state. There's a couple of different ways you can receive supports from. I'm going to focus a little bit more on DDS, but because that's just the biggest and most common, but there are other options as well in other agencies like I mentioned. So then it changes from an IEP meeting to an ISP meeting, an individual service plan, to really specify different goals and having them continue to move forward. Like my brother really doesn't like to clean the windows, really doesn't like to do certain things, but he loves to shred. We're trying to get to expand kind of what he likes to do. So every single year during the ISP meeting, we'll go over different objectives, have him learn some new words, and continuously try to obviously progress in his independence. Learning different adult, different types of activities of daily living as well is obviously one of the objectives. And then retirement for a parent. So you can see kind of the traditional, I like this kind of in quotes because I don't think anyone is really typical. But if your child is going to college, obviously think about planning for that. How are you going to pay for that? Whether it be a 529 or an ABLE account, different options for you to consider for both of your or all of your children. And then thinking about a parent's retirement as well. So many times families come and speak with us and they really just focus on their child with special needs and want to almost keep it in a silo. But your family is really a true unit. You really want to consider all of the different people, all of the different objectives, whether it's college, helping to start a business, what monies would be used to help with those different objectives, making sure you have enough set aside for your retirement, because if you don't, It'd be really hard for you to be able to provide for your child if you don't have the resources set aside for your own objectives as well. So balancing, again, like we mentioned in the previous slide, the different objectives with your goals. And then age 65, sorry, it's a little bit young. Even Social Security changed the age to 67 for full retirement age for many folks. And the required minimum distributions for when you do retire, you guys are familiar with those, just changed the age of 72. So as you can see, people are living longer. People need to kind of postpone their retirement a little bit because you may live, have more than a third of your life in those retirement years, and maybe you're working for a third of your life, and maybe challenging to be able to save enough to cover all of those expenses if you retire a little bit earlier. But again, every situation is different, so something to consider, and balancing again what you have in non-retirement and retirement assets. And then the next is thinking about estate distribution. So actually part of the update of the book, we're going to include another kind of tick on the timeline, and that is, it's not really a tick because it is an ongoing process, but when you do transition some roles that you may have to other people, whether it be professionals, family, friends, no one can do it all, but there is a type of way that you can potentially start to transition some roles and responsibilities that you have for your child onto someone else, just so that, because it does take time. Obviously, you've learned your child over their entire lifetime, what they need, what assistance is helpful. Maybe nice to kind of do it over an extended period of time to transition some of those roles and responsibilities, but not what we're focusing on today, but just wanted to mention that, especially since this is MSSN with siblings, something for us siblings to think about and talk to our parents about. So moving on, thinking about what we call the 5 factors of special needs planning. And just want to stop for a second to see if anybody has any questions. Oh, make sure I'm talking more about siblings. I'm sorry. I just want to see some parents, some siblings. So when thinking about the 5 factors of special needs financial planning, there are a lot of different ways that siblings can be involved and start to think about what their role would be in the future, even today or tomorrow, or what conversation to maybe start having with the parents. So let's start with the heart, because I think that is really where siblings come into the conversation, is thinking, okay, for example, for me, it's been my entire life. I was 4 years old when James was born, so don't really know or remember anything before him being born. So it's, again, our entire life. I think that is the biggest difference, that I feel when speaking to parents and siblings, is that it just is ingrained in you. It is part of your life. You don't know anything different. So you want to know how to kind of adjust. What will your role and responsibility be? And some siblings want to take on a lot of responsibility. Some siblings are not comfortable taking on any responsibility. And that is 100% okay. No matter whatever option you want, maybe you want to move off to another state, another country, that is okay. I think the biggest thing is that there needs to be some form of communication. If that is the way that it's really hard when everyone is planning one way and not having conversations, and then something would change. So really important to have open dialogue. I think it was really easy for us because we did have unique planning strategies, unique kind of considerations, that it was a very open dialogue. I remember in kindergarten going to school with, here's what Down syndrome is, this book, and kind of walking through it and always talking about it. And now more than ever, I think that people are okay and comfortable talking about disabilities. It's not just a taboo topic that no one's aware of. They're movie stars that have different disabilities, and it's really much more, out there, which is great and important for the world, right? And so thinking about the emotional factors, so one thing that you may consider doing with your parents is completing a letter of intent. So that is one of the first things that I remember I did with my parents was, and I can send MSSN a copy of the letter of intent that we have. It's also on our website, specialneedsplanning.com, that you can download. And it's a great way to just kind of walk through all of the questions that a sibling may not know to ask. Just because I thought that I was the best sister, and I still had so many questions, especially before starting to work with my dad and really understand all of the different factors that go into planning, what I need to know. All the different government benefits that are out there. How do you access them? What are the eligibility requirements? Not that a sibling needs to know all of that, But I think some characteristics, which MSSN may have talked about before, is kind of siblings like to know, like to have a little bit of control and kind of understand, you know, what the future looks like so that you can participate. But again, I think most parents that come to speak with us always said they never want it to be a burden for their child. But it's important if the sibling does want to have a role to mention that to the parents for many reasons. Obviously, again, they usually think that it would be a big burden and they don't want to have you have too much responsibility. So make sure if that's what your wishes are that you talk about it. And again, the letter of intent is a great way to kind of start that conversation. And it is broken out by those 5 factors. And the next is financial. So a big question that, you know, siblings may have is, well, will there be enough money? Will I need to be able to, do I need to save money for the future if my parents are not able to save enough money? And that is a good question. You know, I think it's, again, another thing that families should talk about. Usually there are different government resources that are out there that can, of course, pay for a lot of the different supports should something happen to both the parents, but it does take advocacy, it does take involvement. And the financial resources can provide some different additional options, and then also enable the family to have a little bit more control over where the child is living, what fun activities they're doing, and so forth. So again, I think the more resources that are available from a personal perspective really just kind of adjust the different options, and again, more control that the family may have. So important to kind of talk about that, as well as adjust the financial plan to plan for the whole family. So one thing that we often talk about with parents is, if there are resources, it is wonderful to be able to help the person without special needs to set them up for the future financially, so that they don't feel any financial pressure themselves, so they can commit some time potentially to their sibling with special needs. Again, obviously every situation is different, but just something to think about, maybe a little bit different than typical traditional planning. Government benefits. So again, that's the federal and state benefits. I think it's really important for siblings to be aware of the different types that are out there. We also have a glossary of terms. We call it SIP tips, and it breaks down the different acronyms that are out there that I've mentioned several times, even today: SSI, SSDI, what that means, and how a sibling potentially could be involved, or what should a sibling know about that acronym. So we have that also on our website. One thing, an easy way for a sibling to be involved is maybe attend the either IEP meeting if your sibling is in school still, or the ISP meeting if your sibling is now being served by DDS. And that's an annual meeting where the case manager would be present, and you would just kind of go over again what those goals and objectives are for the future. Legal. So this is really important for the siblings to be aware is there a special needs trust? And if there is, what is the role that the sibling may have? Are they going to be trustee? Are they taking over some other type of fiduciary duty, such as the personal representative of the estate? Or are they potentially going to be asked to step up and serve as guardian or power of attorney? So we'll go over that a little bit more. And again, I know that some other attorneys are going to be presenting more specifically on that specific topic as well in the coming weeks to MSSN. So family and support, obviously that has a lot to do with the whole family unit. Who are the ones today to provide the different supports for the loved one, whether it be emotional supports, fun activities, daily care activities, combination of all of them? Who serves those roles? I think one of the most common questions that siblings ask is, well, what does mom and dad do every day? What would we need to do if something were to happen to them? So we find it very helpful. Even in the letter of intent, you can document, what does the daily life look like for a parent? And then that could be a helpful starting point as well for these different conversations that you may want to have with your parents. So legal factors, this is a little bit more geared towards parents, but I'm going to pick a twist and do it more for siblings. So what do you do if, a lot of times when parents draft a power of attorney for their child with special needs, it may make sense for them also to draft a power of attorney for you, or you to draft a power of attorney for yourself. If you are old enough to do that, over age 18, you want to have a power of attorney, because in case something were to happen to you, you want to make sure that your parents wouldn't have to go and file for guardianship or for conservatorship over your assets or your person should something happen, if you were in a car accident, for example, and unable to make your decisions for even a short period of time, really important to be able to nominate someone else to do that. Just like your sibling may be under guardianship or have a power of attorney, you again want to make sure that you can avoid that, having to have your family apply for or go to the courts to get guardianship. So kind of just check it off, make sure you have power of attorney for yourself, and may name a spouse or family or friends or whoever you choose that you think would be able to take, that would pass on your wishes and be able to do your wishes for you. So these are the different documents that parents typically will prepare when they have a child with special needs. So they'll have their basic estate planning documents, which I mentioned a moment ago, which is that power of attorney. So that is, if something were to happen to your parents, you may be named as what's called the power of attorney to be able to step in and pay their bills and do different things if they were unable to. Again, same document that you should have. And healthcare proxy, that's the person that would make them healthcare decisions if they were unable to. And a will is what would divide their probate asset. So any checking account, their home, any assets that do not have a beneficiary designation, such as life insurance or retirement accounts, would flow through the will. And that is many times where they would indicate also who they would like to be the successor guardian if your brother or sister needs a guardian at this point. It is not an automatic appointment. So should something happen to both of your parents, it's really important to either reach out to the attorney that they've worked with to prepare their documents or contact the court. There's a process that you would need to go through so that you could then be appointed as their guardian. There's temporary guardianship, but again, it is a little bit of a process. And sometimes what siblings do is when the parents do become older, they go through the guardianship process with their parents and become the co-guardian. So when something does happen to a parent, that sibling could automatically step up. Obviously, the deceased parent would no longer be, and that person would be able to continue. There's reasons why it may or may not make sense, early on, but every family, again, is different, but that is something that some parents often do. A special needs trust. So that is a type of vehicle that enables your parents to pass assets to your brother or sister and protect it for government benefits and make it so that your brother and sister aren't the ones in control of making the distributions, but instead someone that your parents and you trust to make those distributions. So maybe you would serve as trustee and you'd be the ones responsible to make the file a tax return each year and make distributions. A lot of parents, again, say they don't want to burden their children with the responsibility of having to pay the bills of their sibling. So there are other options, such as a professional guardian, maybe another family member, or maybe you have co-guardianship. It is very unique to each family. So oftentimes, same thing, you can start with a letter of intent, outlining all of the different people that are really important, play key roles in the family's life, and then figure out, is there someone that would be able to step in as the role of trustee, or would it be a team effort? So again, it really is a very specific process that you would go through, and I'll let Fred and Annette talk more about that, because it is, or there's also corporate trustees. You can have a bank be named as a trustee. So there's several different options. Another is a first party trust. So that would usually come about if your parents did not go and create an estate plan. So if assets were distributed per the standard probate in Massachusetts, where it would be divided amongst their children equally. So you may receive a portion to you outright, and your sibling with special needs may also receive a portion outright to them. However, that may disqualify them for benefits. So there are ways, Cindy likes to call it the whoops trust. Whoops, money was left in the individual's name. So there is a little bit of a more of a process that you'd have to go through to get that into what they call a first party trust. You think the first parties that person's money that then funds that trust, and then that would make them eligible for benefits again. So worst things could happen. There is what's called a payback on that account, which would go back to Mass Health potentially for any monies that was spent from Mass Health for that for your sibling. But the good thing is money could be in there, they could continue their services, and you could use that money to supplement what the government is able to provide during their lifetime. In guardianship and alternatives, I talked a little bit about that. That really is the person that's responsible for where is the person going to live, any healthcare decisions, and so forth. So really important to kind of talk as a family about who is the best person for these different roles. So government benefits. So how do you identify, maximize, and protect the benefits? So again, like I mentioned earlier, there are two different types of government benefits. One is the entitlement programs. So those are typically funded by the federal government. And the reason why those are entitlement programs, because if you qualify based on certain criteria, you are entitled to receive these different benefits. And again, most of those are for the federal government based on assets and income and disability, they would qualify. Non-entitlements are different programs that the state provides for, such as DDS. And that is not an entitlement because it really is dependent on what the needs are. So how many people in the state of Massachusetts, what are the needs? And then the state would give different funds dependent. Again, it's very hard for the state, I think, to be able to figure out who should be receiving what benefits because we're dealing with people here. Obviously, people change as time goes on as well. So the state DDS does a great job. They serve so many people and work really hard to try to make it as equal and fair as possible based, again, on abilities and needs. So the federal government benefit entitlement. So your child, technically, you really should try to aim to have no more than $2,000 in the sibling's name. And the reason why you do not want more than $2,000 in the sibling's name is because when they do have more than $2,000, they would not be eligible for what we call supplemental security income, SSI. So that is a monthly income that your sibling could receive if they have a disability, do not have more than $2,000 in their name, and are not gainfully employed. Gainfully employed is a very small number. I'm not sure off the top of my head what exactly the number is for this year, but it is pretty minimal. And so a couple $1,000s, but $2,000 or so a month, they would not be able to earn for sure. So looking at Medicaid and Mass Health. So that is usually when the person applies for SSI, because they do not have the $2,000 in their name, they'd automatically be eligible for Mass Health. Mass Health pays for a lot of different benefits that you may not be aware of, but that your child may be receiving. It also covers different co-pays. It also, if you have a family plan, if your parents have a family plan that they're paying for, it actually could help to reimburse for some of the different premiums that they pay to keep your brother or sister on that health insurance. Maybe some different specialists that they see don't take Medicare or Mass Health, so they would need to, or Medicaid and Mass Health, so they would need to stay on the family plan, but again, Mass Health would reimburse for some of the premiums. And the reason for that is because Mass Health would be viewed as a secondary insured. So your parents' health insurance plan would be used first for your brother or sister, and then Mass Health would be second. Mass Health would cover all the co-pays and things like that as well, but usually would have to pay less out of pocket than if it was the primary insurance. Adult family care, or PCA. So those are two different types of supports that your brother or sister may be able to receive. And you may be familiar with it because from a pretty young age, like I think around 15 or 16, a sibling can be a PCA, and they can receive like a certain number of hours per week that they need care for, and that somebody can come into the home, or a sibling could be the PCA and provide those supports to the individual. That's more on an hourly basis, or AFC, adult family care, that's like a monthly stipend. So there's two different amounts that the person could receive based on the abilities of the individual, how many activities of daily living they need assistance with. And then there's a tax-free stipend that AFC care provider could receive. The caveat is that you cannot be the guardian and the AFC caregiver. So many times families decide, well, one parent will be the guardian and one parent would be the AFC care provider. So something to just kind of think about, or if you're living with your brother or sister, you could be the AFC care provider, but you would not be able to be the guardian. Another is Section 8. Section 8 is a great federal benefit that helps pay for rent. So it's based on the town that the person is living in, and then they would pay for about 75% or so of the fair market rent, and then the difference will be made up from the person's SSI, Social Security income amount. When your parents retire or pass away, your brother or sister, if they're receiving SSI now, will switch over to SSDI, Social Security Disability Income. And when your parents are retired, your sibling would be eligible for 50% of their retirement benefit. When your parents pass away, they'll be eligible for 75% of their Social Security benefit. So a nice, income. Obviously, if your sibling needs a lot of care, it may not be enough to cover everything, but it is a nice start. Also, 2 years after they start receiving SSDI, they'll also be eligible for Medicare. So they'll have Medicare, Medicaid, pretty robust type of insurance. Some people decide to supplement it, really depends, but something to kind of be aware of, that they will be eligible for Medicare 2 years, even if they're not the age of 65 after receiving Social Security disability income. And then veterans benefits, the very specific veterans benefits, maybe pensions, TRICARE as well. I think we're actually going to be in an article sometime in the near term, if you are a military family, about special needs planning with military benefits. So I can share that along with Emily as well, if there's anyone in the audience that has that, that fits that criteria. So state government benefits, again, this is, I've talked a little bit about, these are the different lead agencies. It's really important. This is a great way to be involved as a sibling, again, to attend those different ISP meetings, talk to your parents about what the future plan is and what agency they're supported by, meet that case coordinator, start to maybe network with different business owners. If you want your brother or sister to have some work, maybe finding a nice job coach or something like that. I know it's a little bit challenging this year, to say the least, but there are different opportunities that are out there. Again, my brother started off volunteering and he did such a good job that his job coach actually went with James to different employers to say, hey, he's doing such a good job, he needs to get paid. And now he has paid work. And he took me out for lunch for the first time a couple years ago and has not done it since, but should probably ask him to do that again. He's doing great. So really important, I think, to find the right different opportunities, whether it's volunteering, just something everybody needs to be a participant in their community, not always a consumer. I think it's easy to kind of go out there and consume and buy things or go shopping or whatever it is, but instead really try to figure out a way to have them contribute in the community as well. And that really is a way to have other people involved. The people recognize, oh, your child is always at the local library helping to read to young kids. And if they're not there for a couple of weeks, people start to ask questions. It really is about building out that circle of supports and making sure that you are bringing in as many people as possible. And sometimes it can be a little bit awkward to ask questions or have your friends, as a sibling, to have your friends involved in the future plan as well. But I think people would feel pretty good about being asked to have such an important responsibility or role, and whether it be as big or small. It could be even just going to the movies once a quarter, once the movies are back open and all of that. But, we're just Zooming. Now it's so easy for people to connect. I think people are being closer to family that are further away than more now than ever. So it's a great way to kind of relink with people. So thinking about the financial factors, obviously this is where we focus a lot of our time, and of course, incorporating all of the different factors, but really making sure that there is a plan in place for the financial aspect. And will there be enough money? And how will the money flow? And who will be responsible to oversee all of this? And where will the money come from? So like I mentioned earlier, one thing to think about is, where should you and your family be spending your time? So a family that maybe is not able to provide for their personal retirement security, obviously a lot of the different supports will come from the government. So you really want to be sending DDS cookies, connecting with them as frequent as possible to make sure that your son or daughter, your brother or sister, son or daughter is in front of them, and that they're familiar with the situation, and that they're trying to place them or find the best types of supports agency that could support them as possible. Finding different volunteering options, really putting yourself out there and figuring it out. Family with modest wealth, probably a combination of government benefits and family resources. So maybe the majority of the resources come from the government, with a portion coming from the family. Maybe they're able to supplement, give them some fun money to pay for different things over the course of the year. Maybe it's an annual trip to Disney, whatever it may be, the family provides some type of supports. A family of significant wealth, that would be an example of a family that maybe would purchase a condo for their loved one, and then the government maybe would provide for the SSI, the income that comes in, maybe a Section 8 voucher, and some AFC or PCA to have some supplements, but that the family is really providing maybe even for some of the ongoing supports. Family of high net worth, the family may pay for all of these different types of supports. However, it is pretty interesting here, because even a family of extremely high net worth, it may be challenging for them to pay for all of the different, for a person's entire lifetime, especially if they are medically complex. So you do want to make sure that you understand what the needs of the individual are and what the future costs may be before totally forgetting about the government benefits, or vice versa. So, and this does not mean the person's going to be happy, unhappy. It really is just where the resources will come from. It really is about creating a full life, and money doesn't matter. My brother, I swear, is zero idea what really a true dollar is worth. However, he does know he loves Slinkies, he loves Coca-Cola, and he loves spending time with us. So really important that we give him those things, and really do not cost a lot except for our time. So really important to always think about that first. The special needs financial planning. So it really is a process. There's no one solution, one thing that will fix this all. It really is extremely individualized. We've seen many different mistakes where families would potentially purchase life insurance for when both parents pass away, but don't have enough coverage in case something were to happen to one parent. Really important to, again, build that planning timeline, understand all different aspects, all different stages of your child's life. Where will the resources come from? Who will be responsible? It's about the people, it's about the resources, and it's about how you kind of combine those two to develop a comprehensive plan. So typically the process that we go through that I think can help to make this a bit easier to process, because it is overwhelming when, again, you are planning for 2 generations, to think about the parents. So again, think about your parents' resources and what they need for their retirement first, and then having the conversations with your parents. Okay, well, what resources may be available to go into the special needs trust, and do you need to consider other alternatives, or again, making sure that you're maximizing this government benefit. So there is a process that we go through with parents. A lot of times we talk to the siblings, we have some conversations with the siblings at some point through the relationship. You usually don't go over the numbers, but share with them what resources from a high level may be available to help determine, where to proceed, whether it's through a DDS funded program or something else. This is kind of just high level what parents should be thinking about, where money should be saved. And a couple more minutes here is going to go over some of those more emotional factors like we've talked about earlier. Creating that letter of intent, which is extremely important, especially for siblings, to start the conversation. I think that, again, can make it a lot easier to start just saying, hey, can we just complete this together? It's not a legally binding document by any extent. It is just a helpful tool to walk through to understand what your parents do on a day-to-day basis. And what will the transfer of those roles and responsibilities look like? Who's the one doing them today, and who will be the one doing them in the future? Maybe having family meetings. One great way is potentially doing a person-centered plan. And that is when you can bring in other people in the community, neighbors. People are doing it virtual now, to just have conversations to see what roles and responsibilities some people may want to take on. So this is the same thing, who will take on those different responsibilities. And as a sibling, I wouldn't feel pressure to take on, more than you can bite, especially if you're looking to start your own family or anything, really, again, to just have a conversation and figure out what would your role be best at. Maybe it's just what's called a trust protector. So you oversee what the trustee is doing. You get annual statements to make sure distributions are being made. Every family has, the person has different abilities. So you want to figure out how you can, again, be involved or not involved. So that's pretty much the presentation for today. Just want to see if anybody has any questions. I'd be happy to dive in a little bit more on any specific topic. I know the 5 factors I think are pretty robust. Obviously, there's a lot to think about when planning for the 2 generations and being a sibling, and thinking about creating a special needs trust. Is wonderful if your parents are open to having you be a part of the process to understand, what the future may look like. But it can also be very overwhelming for a parent to think about all of this. So maybe it's, give them some time to have some conversations with their attorney first, and then get involved as time goes on. And just communicate. I can't say that enough. So really is about all of these different things. And I think that it makes sense for us siblings to really start thinking about our financial future as early as possible, just because that really will enable you to not be as stressed in the future for your personal finances, and be able to spend more time potentially with your sibling or handling some of those other items too. But again, there's more parents than not, we've heard, that really just don't want their siblings to feel burdened in any way. But if you want to have a responsibility, it looks like there's a good amount of siblings on the call today. Really want to make sure you speak up if you have any strong feelings one way or another. So I just spoke for a long time. Any questions?
Alex, this is Emily. It does look like you've got one question so far from Liz. She writes in the chat, curious about how these benefits and assisted living care wait list transfers to different states. My sister is in Florida and I'm in New York City.
So good question. It is extremely complicated, and they do not transfer. Even the federal benefits that you think may transfer much, easy because they are federal benefits, there is a process. So Mass Health, Medicaid, for example, is a federal benefit that's funded federally, but state administered. So you would need to likely prove residency for your sister for a certain amount of time in New York, if you plan on having them move to New York, before they would be eligible for even Mass Health. So I suggest reaching out to the local ARC in New York City, or wherever you are in New York, and have them talk with you about the process. Even guardianship. So there are different states, there's kind of a code that you should be able to transfer from one state to another, but typically you do need to even go through the whole guardianship process again. So in many cases, it may be best for that person, because your sister may have a life in Florida. I know this time of year, I'd love to be down in Florida. May have a life down there. So you may want to keep them in Florida if they have a community, they have friends, and figure out a way to kind of oversee things while you're in New York. So it's a conversation I would have as a family to kind of figure out, okay, when your parents pass away, would it be best for her to come to New York, or would it be best for her to stay down in Florida? I haven't heard great things about either states when it comes to government supports in either New York or in Florida. So it may be similar from the types of supports that they would receive, but there would be definitely some paperwork that would be needed to get the transfer from kind of Florida to New York.
Hey, Alex, one area I don't hear talked about a lot is digital assets. And I think you and I talked a long time ago, and I had shared LastPass with you, the tool that we use. I don't know if you've played with that at all, but as Thomas and I were sitting here, so LastPass is a password manager. So all the accounts I have online, all my stuff is there, but they have a family plan with that. And actually, as we were sitting here in this seminar, I just invited Thomas to be a backup for me, so that if something happened to me within 24 hours, he could have access to all my accounts and passwords. In today's world, a lot of what I do for John is managed online with online accounts. And if something were to happen to parents, without that information, it's a painful process. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I know digital assets are more of a topic even on powers of attorney or estate documents. But even if you have it covered on the legal side, from a practical perspective, having a tool that allows you to step in and have access to all that information other than a sheet of paper. So we
100
found LastPass to be a great tool to manage some of that.
Ed, I agree with you 110%. Back in the day, people used to be able to go to their parents' house and sit there, and then the statements would trickle in. Everyone's going paperless, and it would be very difficult. You know, it may take over a year to be able to potentially get some statements in the mail, if at all. So I agree with you. So, you know, it is concerning if there isn't a central location or someone doesn't know of all the different accounts that you have, to make sure that someone else will be able to step in and be able to access all of that. So I agree completely. More and more attorneys, like you said, are adding digital assets, even like Facebook accounts. You know, who controls that when somebody passes away? As simple and strange as it may seem, it is something that we all need to think more and more about. But from a practical perspective, I do need to check out that LastPass some more. I know you mentioned that before, and I think it's really important and something we probably should even include in this topic. Sometimes I remember it, sometimes I
I think it
don't.
would be a good addition, because even, just while I'm alive and here, it helps me make sure every account I have online has a separate, unique, strong password. So it helps that. But like I said, if something happened to me, within 3 hours, my wife can access everything. Within a day, Thomas can access stuff. And within 2 days, my sister, if she had to, could go in and request access. And as long as I don't deny their access. So again, it's LastPass. And I'm sure there's other tools out there, but this one has been really, really good for us.
Yeah, and Ed does his research too, everyone. So take his advice very strongly. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good point that, the letter of intent does have a place to kind of document a lot of financial assets and so forth, but who keeps that updated? Obviously, you're using your LastPass probably on a daily basis. You're updating it ongoing. So it's a great way to be able to make sure that there's nothing lost, or nobody has to be a detective either. Siblings can just kind of step in seamlessly. So thank you, Ed. So yeah, and I'm always available, please reach out. Obviously, being a sibling, sometimes there's conversations you want to have with your parents, you're not ready yet to have with your parents. We're here, we understand completely. So, but really honored to be asked by MSSN to come and present today. This was kind of hopefully a nice broad overview of what parents think about when planning, and then also some different ways that a sibling can be involved as time goes on as well.
Thank you so much, Alex. What a wonderful presentation filled with so much important information and resources. I think this is going to be very, very helpful for families. And thank you for offering to, follow up. If people have questions, they can reach Alex directly on her website. Would you put your website in the chat box, Alex?
Yeah.
And in general, if there are questions related to sibling issues, please feel free to reach out to the Massachusetts Sibling Support Network. And that is ma.siblingsupport.org. And we do have a couple more minutes. So Alex, would it be okay with you to stay on the call in case we do have a last minute question?
Of course.
Great. So we'll be wrapping up at 1.
I'm just going to actually share some. Oh, here's a picture of my brother. How about that? Here's both my brothers. There's James, who I talked a bit about. Pictures are nice. And here's Cindy with her brother. Other brothers too, all of her brothers.
Nice.
Here's the different.
I did have a question actually about ISPs. Because my understanding is that if a parent puts a child in a private school setting that's not an out-of-district placement, then that family would get an ISP instead of an IEP. Is that correct?
I have not heard of that because typically the ISP is with the Department of Developmental Services. So usually post 22, unless for some reason they're receiving DDS services at the age of like 20, 21, maybe it's switched to an ISP, but IEP is usually for the school system, what they need to do. So I have not heard of that, but I'm definitely not an expert in that area, but that's my understanding of the difference between ISP is for DDS goal setting and IEP is for the education in the school system. So I'm not sure if anybody else has.
Hi, yeah, Alex, this is Hillary. I'll just chime in that what you said is accurate. I mean, the DDS ISP would not be in play while a child is receiving special ed services. So I'm not sure, Emily, if you're thinking of something else, but the DDS ISP would be when somebody is actually entered into adult services and receiving adult services from DDS. There might be a different ISP that's from a different agency or something that you're thinking of, but
Yes, I think that's what
Yeah.
it is. I think
Okay.
there's in some, it's another form that I've heard that private schools have used. So, but it's not the official DDS ISP. And thank you,
does that
Hillary. for
play
chiming in.
into like the financial is that related? Is that related to like the financial planning somehow or like planning for the future? I'm
No,
just trying
it
to
was just
understand.
something that jumped out
Oh.
because I wanted to clarify the ISP.
I've heard sometimes at schools, if they're out of district, almost like deny, like the school system will say, well, you're going out of district, so we're not responsible for the IEP. But
Right.
it's
Yeah.
kind of one-offs that I've heard, and I think you really want to stick with the IEP from just some experience. I don't know, but thank
Right.
you. Who might know more than me. Definitely.
Emily, if you need referrals to folks within the special ed community that could more accurately answer that, I'm happy to provide those, but that's really
Thank
a
you, Hillary.
special ed question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not related to, that's kind of an aside. So it looks like, Alex, you must have answered everyone's questions in your presentation because we don't have other questions. So it is time to wrap up. A big thank you again to Alex and to everybody who took time out of your day to join today's webinar. We will be sending a short survey to everybody, and we appreciate if you don't mind filling it out and sending it back. And I hope everybody has a sane and safe rest of your week.
Thank you, Emily.